Hi everyone, I'm Ron Steve, and in this video, I'll demonstrate how to deploy an Azure Data Factory from a dev to QA environment with Azure DevOps by using continuous integration and deployment best practices. Continuous integration and delivery, or CICD, is the process of automatically testing and pushing each incremental change made to your codebase as early as possible from one environment to another. Deploying an Azure Data Factory environment with CICD DevOps moves incremental changes from the dev environment to another environment. There are many benefits to CICD, including a faster release rate since failures are detected faster and repaired faster. Another benefit is reduced costs, since automation in the CICD pipeline reduces the number of errors that can take place in many of the repetitive steps of the process. By following this CI/CD process, a developer's time instantly frees up and could be spent on other value-added product development activities. Now, this sounds like a great deal, right? And something that's worth implementing the right way. So let's do it. All right, so let's take a look at an Azure Data Factory multi-environment DevOps CI/CD architecture diagram to get an idea of how this all ties together. A developer will initially begin the process by creating a change in a development data factory and publish those changes to a source repo, such as a GitHub or Git repo. It's important to note that when these changes are published, they'll be committed to the specified repo. Additionally, the data factory ARM and parameter JSON files will be committed to the ADF publish branch, which we'll use for the CI/CD process. We can't really use the master branch for this approach, since these files are exclusively committed to the publish branch. All right, from there, we can go ahead and create an Azure DevOps build pipeline, which will publish the artifacts from the GitHub repo to the Azure DevOps artifacts repo, just so we have the artifacts stored in DevOps. After the build pipeline is created, we can go ahead and create a release pipeline, which will deploy the incremental data factory changes from the dev environment to the QA environment. Note that this process will also override the dev configuration connections, which we can define in the release pipeline. This is important because it'll help prevent manual intervention to have to change the configuration connections from dev to QA, and this data factory CI/CD process will be defined, built, and governed by the Azure DevOps build and release pipelines. This demonstration assumes that a few prerequisites have been completed. Here's a list of prerequisites to complete prior to continuing with the demo. Initially, I'll create the following Azure resources in both a dev and a QA resource group. We'll need a Data Lake Storage Gen 2 for a sample linked service connection, a Data Factory V2 for the CI/CD process, a Key Vault to store our secrets, and a SQL Server and database for another sample linked service connection. I'll also create a few linked services in the Dev Data Factory for testing purposes. For my demo, I've created a Data Lake Storage linked service, a Key Vault linked service, and an Azure SQL Database linked service. I'll also need to connect the Dev Data Factory to a source repo, which will be GitHub for this demo. I'll then publish the Dev Data Factory to commit the changes to the ADF publish branch, and finally, I'll verify that the changes have been committed to the source repo. Perfect! We're almost ready to jump into the demo. In this demo, we'll create a continuous integration DevOps build pipeline from a GitHub repo containing a dev Azure Data Factory environment. We'll also create a continuous deployment DevOps release pipeline containing the dev to QA Azure Data Factory environment changes. So, without further ado, let's get started by navigating to the Azure portal and ensuring that my dev resource group contains all the required resources. I'll then go ahead and launch the Dev Data Factory and ensure that it's connected to the GitHub repo, and also verify that it contains the linked services that were outlined in the prerequisites section. Perfect. Now, let's navigate to Azure DevOps. Oh, and remember to create a new project. I'll then create a new continuous integration build pipeline and select the source GitHub repo and branch. I'll then add and configure a publish build artifact task and run the build pipeline. And the job succeeded. Perfect. I can go ahead and click the job to view more detail if needed. All right, we are making great progress. Now we're ready to create the release pipeline. But before we do, let's navigate to this Microsoft article and save the following sample pre- and post-deployment scripts to the GitHub repo. This will be used to start and stop the triggers during the deployment process. Awesome. Now let's verify that the ARM template and PowerShell scripts are committed to the GitHub repo. We'll use these artifacts in the release pipeline. All right. Now for the exciting part. Let's go ahead and create the release pipeline. We'll begin by adding the pipeline as a source artifact. We'll also add a stage which will contain the release pipeline deployment tasks. Let's begin by adding and configuring an Azure PowerShell script task. This will be used to stop the data factory triggers. Ensure that the script path is pointing to the pre- and post-deployment PowerShell scripts. Also, ensure that the script arguments are configured correctly. The next step would be to add and configure an ARM template deployment task, and ensure that the template parameters, and override template parameters are configured accurately. Finally, let's go ahead and add another PowerShell script task to restart the triggers. Let's save and create the release pipeline. And as we can see, the release pipeline has successfully deployed. Let's do one final check by navigating to the QA Data Factory environment to verify that the changes have been deployed from dev to QA. Let's also check the SQL database linked service to ensure that it has been updated to the QA configuration connections. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. The DevOps CI/CD process successfully deployed the changes from the dev to the QA Data Factory environments. How cool is that? In this video, I demonstrated how to deploy Azure Data Factory CI/CD environment changes with Azure DevOps. We created a continuous integration build pipeline and deployed a continuous deployment release pipeline. By scheduling this automation in Azure DevOps, developers and organizations can reap numerous benefits, including reduced costs, increased transparency, no manual intervention, and finally, and most importantly, more time for developers to spend on value-added work. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my GitHub repo for more detail. Thanks for watching.